This is a main conclusion question, and when our only job is to find the conclusion, we don't expect the authors of the LSAT to make it easy on us. They're not just going to put it at the bottom with a therefore or a thus. They're going to try to hide it from us. So we're looking for support indicators, like probably not therefore or thus, but like so or for or after all, the less common ones. And we're also looking for negative contrast words like however or but. We don't really get any of those here. And the last thing we're looking for is just facts that are supported, right? So as we consider each sentence here, we're going to ask ourselves at the end, do we get backup for that? And so what ends up happening here is this first sentence ends up being our conclusion. The idea that double-blind techniques should be used whenever possible. Oh, also should claims. That's another good way to get into this. Should claims tend to need to be supported. Like, how do you know that we should always use these? They're going to go on to tell you why. And so they're supporting the idea that you should always use these double-blind techniques. They help prevent misinterpretations that arise due to scientists' expectations. And clearly, scientists should be diligent in trying to avoid such misinterpretations. I know this is another should claim. We'll address that in a second. So how do we know that we should always use double-blind techniques? Well, they help avoid misinterpretation, and scientists should really try to avoid misinterpretation, and so that's why they should use these techniques. This is our conclusion. Now, if you were thinking this bottom sentence was the conclusion, you'd have to ask yourself, where's the support for it? How do I know that scientists should be extremely diligent in trying to avoid such misinterpretations? Where's the backup for that idea? And it's lacking. There just isn't any. This isn't supported. So this is a should claim that's being put forward as a premise, and it's supporting the should in our conclusion. Because scientists should try to avoid misinterpretations, and because this technique does that, scientists should use this technique. And so here's a should claim that's not being backed up, but together with this claim in the middle, it backs up our conclusion in the first sentence. And on main conclusion questions, you really ought to consider the first sentence as a viable candidate. They love to try and hide the conclusion up there. So let's go ahead and check out the answer choices. We're looking for a restatement of that first sentence. Answer choice A isn't a restatement of the first sentence, so it's out. It kind of sounds a little bit like this first premise here, but we're not interested in finding the premise. We want to find a restatement that says always use double-blind techniques. It is advisable for scientists to use double-blind techniques in as high a proportion of their experiments as they can, whenever possible. Always use them whenever you can. I like B. It's a good paraphrase of our first sentence. Let's see what went wrong with C, D, and E. Scientists sometimes neglect to consider the risk of misinterpreting evidence. Is that even stated? Do they talk about any scientific neglect? I don't think this is stated in the passage. So the conclusion has to be stated in the passage. That's mandatory. Whenever possible, scientists should refrain from interpreting evidence on the basis of previously formed expectations and convictions. Well, that's kind of like putting these two ideas together, but it's not restating our conclusion. Combining two premises is not the same as restating the conclusion, and the right answer here needs to restate the conclusion. The conclusion is going to exist in your passage as a sentence, and so the right answer needs to say basically the same thing, express the same idea as closely as possible, and so far B is the best candidate. Double-blind techniques are often an effective way of ensuring objectivity. That doesn't go far enough. It needs to say we should use them whenever possible. And so B is the only answer choice that says that.